Call to order the work session on alcohol beverage control liquor licensing. We'll begin by introductions, beginning with Ernie Hall.
Jennifer Johnston, WOC.
Dick Brady.
Harriet Drummond.
Paul.
Ms. Tucker, introduce yourself.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Thank you. Ms. Tucker, the floor is yours.
Well, we're going to start today with a presentation from Amanda Moser. We're using this opportunity as sort of a training session for staff also, and we have people with us who have probably much more background overall in this than I do, but there are so many different pieces to see to the conditional use permits related to alcohol and to the opportunity for the assembly to protest a license that it really would help. Anna, I want to introduce you also. Maybe you could stand up. Anna is our new deputy municipal clerk for licensing. And so, Anna, maybe you could come and sit up here too so that you have full participation with the rest of us in our session. And anybody who's more comfortable working from a table seat, Ernie has allowed me to invite everybody to join at the table. In this position, you may be called upon. There, I will be less reluctant to call.
She's trying to be.
Oh, come on, Jerry, join us up here.
We're sort of an egalitarian group up here today. And Bonnie,
Jerry, we haven't spent enough time with you this week, especially me and Ernie and Debbie and Jennifer.
that includes you and Ira. So, okay, so I'm going to turn the floor over to Amanda. Amanda is also going to introduce Francis.
My name's Amanda Moser. I have been working in the clerk's office for the past just about 3 years, working with liquor licenses and business licenses. And so I just wanted to take about 7 minutes to talk through the municipal process when we receive the applications from the ABC board. I have worked closely over the past couple of years with Francis over in the planning department. He works on the land use issues related to the liquor licenses, so he has been working on the conditional use permits and the administrative site plan reviews, and he's going to spend some time talking through those issues. But just to give you a timeline of what happens, if an applicant wants a new renewal, transfer of ownership, transfer of location, transfer of ownership and location, they first go to the ABC board and make application with the ABC board. The ABC board issues the licenses, controls the licenses, but we receive them from the ABC board as the local governing body for the municipality of Anchorage. So when we receive them from the ABC board, we have a 60-day time period to process these licenses. Within 60 days, they have to go before the assembly. So we receive them, and that starts our timeline. So the day that we receive them, we make note of what day we receive them, and we send out the applications to the various departments. And I'm going to go into some of these things in a little bit more detail on the next slide, but I just want to kind of walk through the 60 days first. And we begin to receive approvals and protests back from those various departments, depending on if there's issues. And then within that 60 days, we find the last assembly meeting and we submit it before the assembly as either an approval or protest. This is another issue that I'm going to go into a little bit more as we go further down. And we also notify the community council for that area 10 days prior to that assembly meeting. And then the assembly takes action at the meeting and we notify the ABC board of either the approval or protest. So I've also given you hard copies of these too. These licenses do a lot of things as we process them at the city. So you can see at the top, we receive it from the ABC board to this clerk's office. And then from there, we send it to the Anchorage Police Department. And we just send them a notification. We don't expect a reply back. And then we send it to Finance. Finance verifies if there's taxes owed. If there's taxes owed, they let us know, and we send the applicant a letter notifying them so they can pay it. And then we send it to Building Safety. The the Anchorage Fire Department and the Health Department. And these, Anchorage Fire Department is actually going to go out and do an inspection to make sure that it meets all the fire codes. Building safety ensures that they have all the required permits. And health also makes sure they have the required permits. So these departments will approve it if they have everything required, or they'll protest it if they are missing one of those things. And the last department that we send it to is planning. And planning will do some things, and I'm going to let Francis talk about that. So as we receive all those notifications back from the different departments, we make the decision if we are going to approve it or if it's a conditional protest. In this information that I've handed out, I've included how you see these before the assembly in the different ways. So that's 4 pages stapled together. The first one is an establishment. These all have gone before you in the last year. Was a bar that owed taxes, and so we've sent them various notification letters from our department, and we did not receive the money owed before the 60 days was up. So we put it before the assembly as a protest until they paid the $9,676.71 owed. All of our protests are written so that the municipal clerk can take action after the assembly meeting. So this particular establishment didn't pay their taxes by the assembly meeting, but they paid it shortly after, and so the municipal clerk was then able to notify the ABC board that it was no longer protested.
Ms. Amanda, is that what you call lifting the protest?
Yes.
In the vernacular? So if you hear that talk, that's what she's doing. The municipal clerk's office, as Amanda said, under the structure of these resolutions, is delegated authority from the assembly to lift the protest, as it's called by the clerk's office, without having the whole thing to come back before the assembly. Sorry, Amanda.
No, it's fine. Thanks for the clarification. So the second example that's in that same packet is an establishment that was mostly ready to go, but it still had a few things. It still needed approval from Health and Human Services and Fire. So it was an establishment that was moving into a new location, but it still was, it still isn't even open to this day. So we have these come through a lot where people will transfer the license and they'll get ready, about 6 months before they're planning to open. And so they just sit and protest until they are ready for their final fire inspection and their final health permits. So the next example is the renewals, which you see usually in December, January, and February. You'll see them in a big packet with probably about 90 pages. You just see all the applications from the various licensees, along with if they've had any notice of violations in that prior year. And the last example is an example when there's no protests. So this was a transfer of ownership for a restaurant eating place liquor license, and it was approved by all the departments, and so it just went before you as part of the consent agenda as an AM. So as we have a lot of different types of liquor licenses, and they are all issued, as I mentioned, by the ABC board. And I'm just going to touch base on this really quickly because I have given everybody an Title IV book. So this is where you'll find more in depth on all these things. But these are sort of the big ones. The beverage dispensary license are these full bar licenses, so beer, wine, and liquor. All of these licenses are based on population. Beverage dispensary is kind of a really interesting one because there's one license for every 3,000 people within the Anchorage area. So there should be about 96 licenses, but because there was a large number grandfather claused in, we actually have about 150 of these licenses within Anchorage. So you will probably for a long time see a new license unless if there's a statute change, but these come before the assembly as renewals. A lot of times they transfer owners, they transfer location, or they transfer owners and locations. Restaurant eating places, there's one for every 1,500 people. These ones are a little bit more common, and these are just the beer, wine establishments. Club licenses, these are for different social organizations there's one for every 1,500 people, and I think that we have about 20 of them in the Anchorage Bowl. And then we have, golf course license, Bottling Works Brewery. There's kind of a slew of interesting different licenses, and they're all listed out here in the Title IV book. And the one thing that I wanted to mention was the package store. It's also based on population, but we did have additional municipal requirements that we put on this license, requiring that the package store IDs, everybody comes in there, so I included that. Another big issue that comes before us that Francis and I both deal with is the catering permits. The state issues catering permits to beverage dispensary license holders, and these are if they're going to have an event off of their licensed premises, so social gatherings, conventions, picnics. And there's no limit from the ABC board on the catering permits, but at the municipal level in Title 21, we do have, say that there's no more than 12 times in a calendar year at the same physical location without the conditional use permit. So the last little piece that I wanted to talk about before I pass this over to Francis was the restaurant designation permit, which is the single piece of paper that I passed out. This comes through with most of the restaurant eating place liquor licenses, and this is allows people under the age of 21 to dine. 16 to 20 can dine unaccompanied by an adult. It allows folks 16 and 17 to be employed at an establishment that serves beer or wine. So this is an additional thing that comes before the assembly along with the liquor license. So I will pass it over to Francis and let him share.
Ms. Amanda, may I just interrupt again for a minute? Not for clarification, but for emphasis on such good materials that you have here. I want to just point out to the Assembly that in the packet that Amanda has of Title 10.50, that in addition to the special condition that was put on packaged liquor stores for the mandatory ID check, the Assembly also, for packaged liquor stores only, and only those located in the downtown area under 1050-045, created a new section to allow itself to have area conditions. And under the first of those sections, A, and the only section now, has the Downtown Community Council District has the same liquor license conditions to be imposed on everyone coming forward there. So, thank you, Mary.
Oh, and I just wanted to mention too,
Just a moment, Ms. Osander.
Mr. Honeman, this is what we had talked about doing and have not done for the Northeast area. So I just thank you for reminding me about that, because I had submitted that I'd work with you on that if you wanted to do it.
Yes.
I did mention all the other handouts that I did provide. I provided you with Title 10, and this is the Anchorage Municipal Code as it relates to alcoholic beverages. So that's in your little packet of papers. And Francis.
Thanks, Julia. So my name is Francis McLaughlin. I work in the current planning section, and my supervisor is Erica McConnell. She's here to my left. What I'll tell you about is the way our land use regulations, our zoning regulations deal with alcohol. Basically, our zoning code categorizes alcoholic beverages into three categories. The first one is permitted principal use. That's a by right use. So an example of that would be a wholesale license, a wholesale distributor's license, a brewery, a winery, a distillery in an I-1 or I-2 district. Basically, industrial type of use. It's a by right in the I-1 light industrial district. So the Celestial Meadery or some other winery will be located, bless you. There's that area that has a few of these. It's, I think, like Silverado and 56th Avenue, west of C Street. There's some like, it's a light industrial area. There are all these units that people rent as sort of storefronts, and there's industrial type uses in there. Anyway, there's a bunch of winery licenses in there. The next type of use, the second one is, or the second category is a site plan review in our zoning code. And an example, so the site plan review, we've referred to it just sort of commonly as an administrative site plan review, because this is a site plan review that is processed administratively through the planning office. And an example of that would be a restaurant and eating place license. And that may be the only license that falls into this category. And it's commonly referred to as a beer and wine license. So an example of that would be, there's a new sushi restaurant, they serve sake and beer and wine, and so the new sushi restaurant is going into a location in a mall that had never had one before or hasn't had one for a long, long time, and so we process their application for a beer and wine license administratively, and that's we check, parking, landscaping, outstanding violations. We sort of just look at the land use issues related to them moving in for that new restaurant license. The third category is a beverage dispensary. The third type of use is a conditional use. And an example of that would be a beverage dispensary license or a package store license. So the conditional use process we take directly to the assembly. It does not go through the Planning and Zoning Commission. Our office processes it to a public hearing in front of the assembly. The examples, a beverage dispensary, example of a beverage dispensary would be like a Mexican restaurant that makes margaritas with tequila. So that's a full bar beverage dispensary license. It's a more expensive license than the beer and wine. That's a conditional use. And we look at the same things that we do for the administrative review, but the decision is made by the assembly based on, public testimony, the standards of approval, the concentration of alcohol in the area, that sort of thing. A package store, same thing as a beverage dispensary. So if a new gas station or a gas station wants to have a new liquor store, then that's a public hearing processed in the same way. That's all I have. Last thing, I guess, Amanda and I speak to one another frequently, many times a day. She's the point person for ABC, so when ABC has questions, they go to the clerk's office. She's their one-stop shop for questions, and so we talk often about, it's a really active portfolio.
Thank you, Francis. I'm going to pick up with a couple of things that Francis talked about, just to give, because I'm going to spend a lot of my time giving kind of a historical background to how we got to where we are, and sort of then focus on the other side of having not protested a license, or having a license come up for a potential protest, or having a CUP question come before the assembly, what the different alternatives are. But before I get to that piece, I need to kind of build into that from how we got to where we are. It's a very fragmented situation in our code, because as we work through the materials that I've handed everybody, we'll see that there are, in addition to the Title 10 code, we have several sections sort of buried in Title 21, and a large section, which I didn't pass out, which is buried in regulations under Title 21, I think. So with, as Francis mentioned, the conditional uses are tied to the type of license in two major categories: package store and beverage dispensary. The beer and wine used to be in front of the assembly also, because I'm just going to stand up more down. In many jurisdictions, municipal jurisdictions, the alcohol license, the alcohol conditional use, is delegated to some type of particular district. It'll be an alcohol allowed district, or it'll be something like that. And here in Anchorage, the municipality decided not to do it that way, that instead it would be held by the assembly as the only really land use, conditional use that the assembly hasn't delegated to the Planning and Zoning Commission to make the first call on. And so, and in that way, several areas throughout the city are by conditional use and only by conditional use. There is no by right section of town where by right you can have a liquor establishment. So it has to go in the form of a conditional use, mandatory conditional use, except for now this one piece which just during my tenure here was carved off by the assembly, and then they let go of that whole public hearing and conditional use permit piece for beer and wine service in a restaurant, for beer and wine to be consumed on the premises. So we don't have that for grocery stores. You'll see because of other differing state laws and other city laws, when you travel out of town, there'll be beer and wine in a grocery store. We don't have that because we have a different system for doing that. So so in the packet that I passed out, well, I'm going to go to Amanda's packet first. And so on the one where she gave examples, and so the front one is 2012-43. If you go to the very kind of back of that one, towards the back, is the one that is the AM. And so it's not a protest, it's an approval. So we don't have any reason to protest. They've passed all their items on there. And you'll look and you'll see that it'll say on the back page of that page 2 of AM5, it'll say there are no taxes owing, and then it says requires that any use, whether principal or accessory, involving the retail sale or dispensing of alcohol beverages permitted only by conditional use, and then in bold it says there is a conditional use permit on each location. So my quiz question to start off our review today, and then we'll come back to it, and I'm just going to have you show hands. If this is a true or false question, if a club was in an area and had a conditional use, and then left, so a new establishment is moving in, they have their own license. So if that property has a prior conditional use, then a new establishment with the same type of ABC license can rely on the conditional use for a new and different type of club operation.
False. It's a trick question.
It is a trick question.
It's a trick question.
Okay,
I say false.
so my answer to that question is, as Ernie said, is false. And then we'll work through these materials and we'll see why Jerry says it's a trick question, because it is a trick question. And it's one that the tricky part of it could use some remedy.
Let the record show I answered it.
Yes,
correctly.
yes, our chair is on top of it. Okay.
Me too.
So yes, and Harriet too, but it was
And I am
your
from the liquor
district, so,
district, from Spenard.
so I
That's
expected
right.
you to answer, you were here on the assembly, yeah, but it's good. So the first couple of documents in your packet are historical, and what you see is that there was a resolution in 2001 that's associated with a letter that the municipality got from the State of Alaska ABC Board. Jerry, you have this in your packet. I'm not going to make you rely on that.
Remember that.
And so what happened was, there was a change in state law that allowed conditions, like conditions put on a conditional use permit, to be enforceable under the ABC license, basically. Did you get a packet? Yeah, okay. And so in piecing, these I found in a notebook that Amanda gave me a copy of from the clerk's office, of historical conditions on conditional use. So what happened was, and that's what you can see in this letter we got from the ABC board, is that the municipality, who may have been represented by contract counsel at that time, Mr. Whitaker, I don't know if he was in the Department of Law or not, he's not identified as a municipal attorney, but he represented the city in litigation because the city, under the new law, tried to enforce, under the liquor license, these conditions that pre-existed on the conditional use prior to the state law. And the ABC board said, nice try, but we're not going to enforce them because opposing counsel, who happened to be Mr. Coffey, has demonstrated that your conditions went into effect before this law was passed, so we're not going to do it, but we encourage you to take some other action and do that and figure out a way, to maybe bring it back. And so that's what the Assembly did. So under AR 368, they said, okay, for all of you out there who have conditions that haven't been otherwise revoked that are attached to your license, we're re-upping them, we're renewing them now that this other law has passed. So the next couple of documents are ones where the Assembly has taken the opportunity to add conditions to, instead of to the conditional use, have added conditions to basically a non-protest. Maybe they filed a protest, there were problems, a long history of problems, and so to work things out, they said to the ABC board, okay, we're gonna not protest, but but our non-protest is on the condition that the ABC board and the establishment incorporate these conditions. So that first page goes back to 1996, and that's the Avenue Bar. And so I've stapled them for you with the conditions on the front on purpose, but they actually were inserted as an attachment to the AR 9615, and you'll see up at the top it says on 213 the Assembly amended the previously adopted 9615 by adding conditions 1 through 9. And so here are the conditions that were added, not to the conditional use permit, but to when they had an opportunity to protest on the transfer, issuance, etc. of a license. So that's one example. This next example is a little more recent. That's in 2006. That's with the Panhandle Bar. Same kind of problem. They're coming up for the renewal or transfer or whatever it is that triggers, as Amanda had shown in her chart, the opportunity for the municipality to weigh in to the licensing situation. So under Title IV, the ABC board has exclusive jurisdiction to issue licenses, but it doesn't take away the Assembly's ability on land use. The ability to operate is still contingent on the establishment following the Assembly's conditions and requirements under law for land use. And only when those only when the ABC board can find that those conditions are arbitrary and capricious, which is a pretty heavy-handed, it's harder for them to get there. It's a high standard for them to meet, for the ABC board to meet, to find that the municipality exercising its overall police power, as it's called, for health and safety, not just APD police power, but the overall public safety police power that a municipality weighs in on, that these things are arbitrary and capricious. But they have to be sort of have a nexus to the land use. And that's why, as Francis and Amanda spoke about, they have to have an impact. The use of the property has to have an impact land use-wise on the surrounding area, on the pull-down of services, on different things that are included in Title IV. And so this is an example of conditions, and the Panhandle, successful or not at the time, I didn't go back to research on how long this stayed in place, but these are conditions that were directly related to the to the public safety issues that the city was having with the operation and the effect on the community in that area. And so that's an example. An example I didn't include in here, but Bill Starr reminded me of recently, is sort of a different way of doing it, and we had some historical precedent for doing it also in the notebook that Amanda provided, is that the conditional use, on the other hand, was not issued to run forever because of problems. So that on a case-by-case basis, the assembly from time to time said, okay, we're going to try out a conditional use for a year, for 3 years. We're going to give you a limited conditional use. And it's not unsimilar from other limited use sort of licenses, so that we don't create an absolute right. The big issue that Mr. Trainey's going to be more familiar with, and maybe Mr. Honeman too from his prior life, that was going on, and of course Ms. Gray Jackson, because of her prior life, was going on long before I came here, was with this Call of the Wild establishment out on Tudor Road. Okay, that was the Assembly's nightmare of how to try and bring a situation under some kind of closure. I had you sit here and then I'm turning my back to you, so I'm sorry. So the next set of things are now sort of focused back on, that was on licensing, and now I'm going to focus us back on conditional use permitting to see sort of some things that came about. So in 2006, an assembly member who's not with the body anymore introduced or circulated an ordinance, because her concern was that these conditional use permits, and so she explains it here, under current law, conditional use permit for liquor establishment remains with the property so long as the liquor license is valid. And if it's not enforced with respect to the property, the conditional use permit will expire 120 days after the removal of the license. But the property owner may apply for an annual extension or waiver, and all these things were going on, so we had deserted places that would still show up on that AM as saying that there's conditional use for, for the life of the property there, and there's no license operating there. And so she was proposing what I've included here as an amendment to a piece of our code, which I haven't gotten to yet, but a piece of the Assembly's code, when I say our code, the one that Amanda and I have right have right at our fingertips on a day-to-day basis to deal with, and that's in 230 procedures of the Assembly. So we have a section in there, which we'll get to, on action on liquor licenses, and there'd be an amendment that would say that it would expire 60 days after cessation of the business. So that got some legs with the Assembly. It got the attention of the Assembly. Debbie may remember, I think, that she was somebody who would keep saying, but we haven't gotten to this part yet, as other things came in front of the Assembly related to this. I didn't go back to see if this ever got introduced. My copy of it didn't have a number on it. And it wasn't prepared, it came out of the Department of Human Services at that time. So the first generation of things about sort of getting some more arms around conditional use standards happened with AO 2006-35, also in your packet. And so that had to do with the catering and special event permits. And then it had a section H in there, that no modification of a conditional use for the retail sale or dispensing of alcohol beverages shall be required for the first duplicate license. So we had some additional leeway, but only if that first duplicate license didn't go beyond 500 square feet, because operationally it was thought that 500 square feet wouldn't be a substantial change to the operation. And B, that could be a deck. So if it fit in those two categories, then instead of having to come in for different changes, it could go to administrative review, which is one of the things that Francis talked about, which is also there for beer and wine license. So that's a small group that could change the operation a bit, but not so substantially that it would have to come in front for a modification of the conditional use permit. Okay. So then, shortly after that, we have what is a very significant change in code that is helpful if it's implemented by the assembly in figuring out how to handle the question that the assembly member brought forward in 2006, and also answering the so-called trick question about what happens when the same license comes in, but their operation is entirely different. And when you have a different operation, and this is the example that the assembly faced in when Harriet was basically representing the entire district alone, because Mr. Clayman was acting mayor. The Fly-By-Night Club that everybody's familiar with, long lead time, they were closing, this was going to be the end, they were going to leave Spenard, and they did. And a new operator was taking over that location. So the location had a conditional use permit for a club establishment, as along with the examples that Francis gave. This would be one of those, not a package store. It did serve some food. It had a full liquor on site consumption license use attached, and somebody was either bringing a license in or was buying Mr. Whitekeys' license. And so for months before it opened, on the web page was the advertisements for what kind of club that was going to be. And it had no bearing on the type of club that was in there before. The times that people let out were going to be let out were different. The crowd was different. Hard Rock Cafe is not like a dinner club where or
Players'
a
House of Rock.
presentation club. Go ahead.
It was
What?
Players' House of Rock.
Oh, Players House, sorry, thank you.
Hard Rock.
What- Hard Rock, yeah, thank you. So Players House of Rock was not going to be an establishment that was going to have an entertainment period for a couple of hours and then let out a couple shows. It was going to be something completely different. But the location and the transfer or reissuance of the license went through the assembly just like this. Conditional use, okay, we'll do it. And then they opened. And then it was giant trouble, because everybody in that neighborhood was, even the other establishments in that neighborhood, there was an effect caused in the parking lot afterwards, in the traffic let out, in the traffic management, and there's a lot of residential in that area, a lot of police calls to the area. I mean, all of a sudden, it's like top on the chart, and everybody's saying, well, why didn't we do anything about it? Well, when they come through routinely and there's just a box checked, then that's not always helpful, because this code, 2006 90S, added, I got all the time here.
Subsection C.
We have, okay, so, shows that if the operation of the business becomes substantially different from the business and operation reviewed by the assembly when the conditional use was granted, pertain to uses involving the sale of alcohol beverages, which also means consumption, the conditional use shall expire unless the licensee applies for and receives assembly approval for a modification of the existing conditional use to reflect the change. And so the problem that we have, though, is that unless we're marking and paying attention to what was in there before, we don't always have a record of that. A lot of the older, with the fly-by-night club, we couldn't even actually find a piece of paper, not in planning, not in the clerk's office, that gave them the conditional use. It had been going on before Mr. Whitekeys got there, so his application had a box checked like this, yep, there's a conditional use permit, but the actual initial conditional use permit was nowhere to be found. And when it's nowhere to be found, we don't have any parameters or package to show us what kind of operation they intended to have. Okay. So in the case of this one, so tell me the name of it, please.
Players House of Rock.
Okay, so in Players House of Rock, the assembly almost miraculously got a second bite at the apple because Players House of Rock came in with that application that Amanda passed out and had up there, which was the restaurant designation. And that was treated as needing a modification and
Substantially
some other as substantially different than when they had first opened. And so we had a roundabout about that, but at least it kind of gave a trigger. And I'm not sure all the things that happened. There were some other business problems, and so the issue got controlled and died, at least as far as my office. And we have a different establishment that doesn't have that's much more like the original conditional use.
Julie,
So yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Didn't they also want to do a breakfast operation?
Right, under
after
that
bar
restaurant
closed?
designation permit,
Yeah,
that's why they were
yeah.
getting it. That was
Yeah,
tied into that, and
yeah.
that's what made it substantially
Yeah.
different. It was outside the hours
Kodiak
of the
Cafe.
original conditional use permit that they were given. So we had a benchmark of what they had applied for, the hours that they said they were going to be open, they wanted the restaurant designation, and then they had additional hours. So then what happens is that they have to go in. If you have an establishment that has, that's going to be, so there's a definition in C, as Paul was pointing out. For purposes of subsection B above, substantially different means any material change in the operation of the business which could result in significant impact on the use and enjoyment of adjacent properties by property owners or occupants. A material change includes, without limitation, an increase in the late night or early morning hours of operation, a change involving the type of entertainment presented, which results in an increase in noise level at the property line, an increase in the parking requirements, a change from a business which meets the requirements of State of Alaska ABC regulations for restaurant designation permit to a business which would not meet such requirements. So the words "without limitation" were my words, that are preferred on the state side instead of including but not limited to. So just know that without limitation means that you're giving a whole bunch of examples here, but if there are other examples that meet this criteria, you're not excluding them in the drafting thing. Okay, so then we get to what we have now. So we have 2115-030 with these pieces on the modification and also a piece on abandonment. And so this abandonment piece went to what I started out with what happens when they don't stay. It's still 120 days, but at least it's bolstered by this other change and a reference to substantially different in C of that section. And again, these are sort of buried. I have to go back and find them every time I need them. In 2115, approval of site plans and conditional uses under Title 21. In addition to that, we have Title 2150, 160, which are the conditional use standards, which is where I always go to look for these. And those give the basic standards for uses involving alcohol. So, on the trick question, if the operation is not going to cause is not going to be substantially different or materially different, then the same conditional use will go without modification. But if it is going to be different, then we need to check those differences and potentially add conditions to the conditional use And perhaps also to the, and then have those reflected back in the, when it comes up into, for transfer.
So what do you suggest?
Oh, for how to, that gap, you
Well,
mean?
I'm assuming that was what you were leading up to, as a proposed code change.
Well, I don't know if it's a code change or change in practice. I think that what Amanda and Francis do now, and what Francis' predecessor, Mary O'Toole did, started doing after that came in, was in the review, would not stop at just checking off whether there's a conditional use. Francis, you can tell me about that, but I think how is that working?
Yeah, I mean, I try and figure out the way this comes in is if there's a new restaurant that wants a full bar license, the beverage dispensary, they want to move into a location that was restaurant before. Say Table 6 was going into a place that already had a restaurant before. If one went out of business and the new one was slipping in and floor plan was the same, then the number of seats and generally nothing was to change except for maybe the sign, then they would not be required to go through the review, the conditional use review all over again, because the conditional use was still in effect. With, one slipped in before the other one. A year hadn't passed where it was inactive, and I didn't answer your question quite right.
So let's use that. So one comes into a commercial strip mall, Table 6 works, and there was one there. We're not impacting, residential adjacent property owners, and so, it doesn't have to come back. A conditional use is in place for that because we don't see any need.
The entitlement runs with the land.
And it doesn't trigger in your review the need for a modification, right?
Right, yeah. If there was a substantial change in, number of chairs, hours of operation, something else about the business, or if the license had, if the conditional use had been inactive or revoked, then they'd have to begin all over again. In the case of Table 6, is a bad example because they were the first restaurant in there, so they were reviewed by the assembly.
Okay, so let's take an establishment like the one that we used here, one like where Taproot is now, that is surrounded by lots of residential property, has had now a history of people being concerned along the property line and the police and stuff like that. So let's say, imagine that Taproot is going to open in a bigger venue, and a different type of, I don't know what they're called now because I'm too old. They were disco or some dance establishment.
Sure.
Or
Platinum Jacks.
Yeah, Platinum Jacks operation was going to move in, or they were going to switch locations, so then what happens on your end in that scenario?
Well, I would send them a letter stating that they needed to apply for a new conditional use. They had to apply for a new conditional use, and I would tell Amanda, and she would tell ABC that the community's going to protest this license until they've obtained a conditional use and all the other sort of approvals that they're required to get. And then Amanda, I think, goes the extra mile and calls them up right away and tells them, hey, you guys have another thing you have to ask for, or another, you have this additional fee, 40 days of processing a new application, and all the time of trouble.
Taproot is where Players House Rock was.
Right. That's
And I've had no complaints from.
I know, but I was just using that as an example.
But I do have a question on that. They added, after they opened, they added an outdoor deck.
Yeah.
Did that qualify under the 500 feet or more?
Well, that's an excellent question.
less?
Yeah, your very astute observation. Yeah, they so they're outdoor. I wasn't around for this. This was under Mary O'Toole's time before I came in. But my understanding is that their temporary seasonal outdoor smoking area that's around the side there is permitted without needing to amend their conditional use. It's just a sort of sneaky way of being able to get extra floor area during certain seasonal. It's like 5 months seasonal.
Right.
Is it an administrative review?
Yeah,
Isn't that-
yeah. There's an administrative review to make sure that
Okay.
they meet their parking requirement. There's some
Okay,
other
that's what I
standards.
was gonna ask.
Right, and that's under that, what I talked about earlier, that one of those ones that passed out, the first one in 2006, said the outdoor decks
And of course, they're-
and smaller than 500 feet indoors.
And of course, they're across the street from the watchful eye of Tom McGrath. I mean, that, you know, it's great that he's in that neighborhood. He keeps an eye on all those operations. No, he never moved.
Okay, any other questions? We're right
I was just confused, Julia, because I thought we were leading up to a new ordinance. I didn't know this was just a general review.
No, this was scheduled as a general review. Now I know, because as Amanda had suggested, also the city is getting a number of renewals. This is renewal time, and then we have several establishments that have been reported that we don't want to make. We don't want them to turn into the headache, the cry of the
Call of the Wild.
Call of the Wildhead.
But just a comment, and I'm summarizing for interest of time because we're right at the end of it. Basically, the Public Safety Committee gets referred, of course, from all our colleagues and, of course, and review as we catch these applications and renewals every other year, or every year, which is about half the licenses 1 year, half the licenses the other year. Is that correct? So what we try to do is work within the framework of what you see up here, in addition to any new information coming in. And at one time, for instance, the red stripe law, Julie and I went through this kind of painstakingly. I learned a lot with that blanket conditional use. For instance, we thought without having to enact a new ordinance that we could just use the conditional use, that upon renewal, we would add that as a condition. And in essence, and correct me if I'm wrong, Julia, there's several things that go into factoring conditional uses, for lack of better terms, is specific to the individual license at the time of either renewal or at the time of application or at the time we determine there's a problem. We just can't broad brush and blanket like there's a bar right now that has issues with complaints of neighbors for the noise. And when you look at everything that's already up here, they're compliant. They're in compliance. And the biggest concern is it's noisy. And so at renewal time, or if we determine that they're violating something that's in condition, then we can move to make new conditions and such. But and then there are some restrictions within that. Is that correct? I mean,
I think there's an important distinction between the liquor license, which is the actual
Correct.
license that's issued by the state,
Correct.
and the conditional use permit, which
And that's why I wanted to
the
get that out
land
there.
use
Get that
handled
out.
by the city. And so I think that that's an important distinction, especially as we come into renewal, because we're renewing their liquor license.
Right.
And so if you have land use concerns, it might be appropriate to address those under the conditional use permit separately from the renewal of the liquor license.
And that's what I was
Well,
trying to
except
do.
in those examples, and this is where I want to make sure, that's why I passed those out. It may not, the problem that faces the assembly in handling these things is to actually revoke a conditional use permit is a large undertaking with a full adjudicatory hearing in front of the assembly, council, and all that. And so it's set up sort of like progressive discipline. It's better to start with modification of the conditional use permit than to revoke the permit. But the protest period does give the assembly the opportunity to do for problem establishments exactly what was done in '95 for the Panhandle, which is say, here are conditions, and we're not gonna, and unless the ABC board puts these conditions into your license, we're gonna protest, because we have the right to protest if you're having this negative impact on our community and land use in our community.
I
Yeah.
wanted to respond to Paul, though, because my understanding is there is an ability to do a broad brush stroke through a land use, and the example you cited of the downtown district, where there's a
And that's what we did with
standards.
Paul's.
Well,
Paul's is
no.
is under Title 10.
well, just a moment, maybe I'm losing it here. My understanding is we had talked, at least a preliminary basis, about doing that for the Northeast Community Council area.
Right.
And so I thought that has not happened. Am I
No,
wrong?
that hasn't happened.
That's what I was talking about,
Right.
is there would be the ability to do specific standards that were higher and different.
Right,
for
Like
geographic area.
and that's one of the questions that I do, that we had that gray area conversation, because we tried doing the red stripe
We tried to do red stripe without
On
passing a
geographic
code.
code.
And so we passed a code in Title 10 to make, and tied red striping into land
Package
use
stores,
background. And so far, it hasn't been contested. And so,
Yeah, no,
and there were reasons to do that. But I mentioned that because the Department of Law had a question about what that would happen. But that worked out. And the research that I did showed that that would be an appropriate thing to do in Title 10.
Got it.
Then we went further and did downtown. And there are other things that you can do area-wide, and Title 10 is probably the place that we put them in, so that then they would be in there. The one thing in practice that Jerry and I have been talking about, Debbie, in answer to your question, is that there is a gap in the, what I call the template language prepared by the planning department for the conditional use permits. They come in front, and it mentions one pre-existing subsection of Title 10, and that by operation of law can be read to be to the exclusion of the things that we put in Title 10. So all of Title 10 needs to be referenced there and made a condition. They have to comply. You want compliance with Title 10 because you put it into code, but you want the violation of Title 10 not only to be a standalone, unenforceable non-compliance with a title that we don't have any enforcement agents to do it with, but you also want it to be a violation of their conditional use permit, and therefore also a violation of the conditions that you issued the non-protest. And Jerry and Francis and I have been working on that.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the work session, Julia. I want to really commend the clerk's office for working with the planning division. There's great synergies there and catching these issues to make sure that they're not issues when they get to the assembly, and with the assembly members' input on problematic areas, that they're worked through the clerk's office and the planning division for resolution. But we are changing the template to incorporate all of 10.
You can do that internally by yourself?
Well, and a recommendation on the conditional use easily.
Okay, good.
And the other thing is that 2020 does give the Assembly some direction on locational requirements for alcohol facilities, so amending 10 to incorporate, if you're going to do Muldoon wherever, that, you know, you're just really fulfilling those responsibilities.
Okay, thank you.
Well done. We're complete.
I have a question, if I might. Pertaining to a specific, when a place, and if I can I name the place?
Yes.
Tesoro Gas Station, thank you. Tesoro Gas Station on C Street. They want a liquor license, as you all probably are, and if you haven't started, you're soon going to be hearing from lots of people.
We already have.
We did.
You're going to get more. The neighborhood is outraged. Years ago, when, I don't remember, I always called it A Street Liquor, had all kinds of conditions on it, and they ignored them. What can the assembly do when those kinds of conditions are ignored, such as no liquor in the old Tesoro station on Spenard and Carweed? No liquor can be sold for less than, in those days, $5. No shooters, no single cigarettes, so on
Okay,
and so forth.
so what happens is, if the assembly puts conditions on the conditional use permit, so let's take that example. So there are conditions that are reflected on the conditional use permit. then, just like progressive discipline, if they don't obey those, then you gotta build the case. You know, you have to show who went, how it happened, where it was, who's doing it, and then you go in for a modification. They don't get to be open the same hours. They don't get to, they can't control these hours. What's the problem? They don't, potentially suspending, depending on the degree of public safety that you can demonstrate, suspending the conditional use permit pending a revocation hearing. And then the revocation hearing is a full trial in front of the assembly. Okay, that's on conditional use. On the license, and that's why it is very important to think about conditions on the protest, because when you put them on the protest, if they are reasonable conditions, and you say, okay, ABC board, we're not going to protest this on the condition that the operator agrees to these conditions, and on the ABC board incorporating these conditions in their license, then as long as those conditions are not arbitrary and capricious and can be demonstrated as a exercise of municipal authority, then violation of those conditions goes against their license. So then there's a hearing, not in front of the assembly, but in front of the ABC board. And then you're really affecting their livelihood. And that's why it is important now that we're coming up. I mean, that is the change in practice, not in code, that needs to happen here, is that everybody needs to recognize when these protests come up, that if you have conditions, get them in there, then incorporate them into the conditions.
I might add that enforcement is pretty limited.
That was gonna be my question. Where does the public report?
ABC and police, the ABC board.
Call the ABC board.
Call this
Okay.
meeting to close, and you can do some side work.
Thank you. Thank you. So Paul,
Yes.
if somebody sees that Government Hill Tesoro is not doing what he's supposed to, who do they report it
The
to?
police department, and so far what I've been told is the